People often believe that affairs begin with a kiss. They don't. They begin with conversations that last a little longer than they should, with shared lunches that seem harmless, with late evenings at work that slowly become routine. One small boundary gives way to another until, one day, someone looks back and realizes they crossed a line they never intended to cross. If someone had told Emma that one ordinary week away from home would change the course of her marriage, she would have smiled and dismissed the idea without a second thought. The morning she left to spend a week with her older sister, her husband Daniel, kissed her forehead, pulled her into a warm embrace, and promised he would miss her every single day until she returned. Emma believed him. She had every reason to. 5 years of marriage had taught her that Daniel was a man whose words could be trusted. Before we continue, kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. We'd also love to know where you're watching from. Emma and Daniel were the kind of couple people quietly admired. They weren't rich or famous, but they had built something many people longed for: a peaceful home filled with laughter, respect, and unwavering companionship. Daniel worked as a senior project manager for a construction company that had grown rapidly over the past few years. Emma had built a successful career as a financial analyst. Their schedules were demanding, but they never allowed work to steal the time that belonged to each other. Every morning followed the same routine. Emma would wake first, brew fresh coffee, and gently remind Daniel that his alarm had been ringing for several minutes. "You know," she'd tease from the kitchen, "normal people wake up after the first alarm." Daniel would shuffle downstairs with sleepy eyes and messy hair. "I was awake. You were negotiating with your pillow." He would grin, steal a sip from her coffee instead of his own, and earn the playful glare she gave him every single morning. "You always drink mine. It tastes better." "That's impossible. I've tested the theory." Those tiny conversations never felt ordinary to them. They were the little habits that slowly became the foundation of 5 happy years together. Their weekends were just as predictable. Sometimes they explored new restaurants. Other weekends they visited family or accepted invitations to birthdays and weddings. Whenever they attended events together, people noticed how naturally they gravitated toward one another. Daniel instinctively reached for Emma's hand while walking. Emma straightened his tie before photographs. Friends joked that they still acted like newlyweds. Daniel always answered with the same smile. "I married my best friend. Why would I stop treating her that way?" Emma would roll her eyes while secretly loving every word. Life wasn't perfect. They argued over forgotten chores, whose turn it was to cook, and whether Daniel owned far too many pairs of sneakers. But they never allowed disagreements to become battles. If one of them was wrong, they apologized. If one of them was hurting, they listened. That had always been enough. Then work changed everything. Emma's company entered one of its busiest financial seasons. Endless reports, client meetings, and impossible deadlines left her physically exhausted. Even Daniel noticed she wasn't herself anymore. One evening, he found her sitting quietly at the dining table, absent-mindedly pushing food around her plate. "You've barely eaten." "I'm just tired." "You've been saying that for 3 weeks." She forced a smile. "I'll be okay." Daniel pulled out the chair beside her. "No, you won't." She looked at him. "I know that look." "What look?" "The one where you're pretending everything's fine because you don't want to worry me." Emma sighed. "I just need this project to end." "You need rest." "I don't have time." "You have to make time." She remained silent. After a moment, Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Go visit Rachel." Emma blinked. "What?" "You've been talking about spending time with your sister for months." "I can't just disappear." "For 1 week you can." "And leave you here by yourself?" He smiled. "I think I'll survive." "You'll live on takeaway." I probably will. You'll forget to water the plants. Possibly. You'll wear the same towel for 7 days. Daniel laughed. Now you're just attacking me. She couldn't help smiling. There it is. What? That smile I've been trying to get back. A few days later, Emma finally agreed. Rachel practically celebrated over the phone when she heard the news. By Friday morning, Emma's suitcase was packed. Daniel insisted on driving her to the bus station himself. The journey there was filled with ordinary conversation. She reminded him not to skip breakfast. He reminded her to stop checking work emails. She warned him not to survive on instant noodles. He promised nothing. When the bus finally arrived, Daniel lifted her suitcase into the luggage compartment before wrapping her in a long embrace. I'll miss you. I'll miss you more. You'll call? Every night. It's a promise? It's a promise. Emma smiled, kissed him goodbye, and climbed aboard. Daniel remained standing exactly where she'd left him until the bus disappeared into traffic. Then he got back into his car and drove toward the office. The biggest project of the year was entering its final stage. The company had recently secured a multi-million-dollar contract, and every department was under enormous pressure to deliver before the client's deadline. Daniel had been placed in charge of coordinating the entire project, while Vanessa had been assigned as lead project coordinator. Vanessa had worked at the company for just over a year. She was intelligent, organized, and remarkably calm during stressful situations. Most people enjoyed working with her because she rarely complained and always found practical solutions when problems appeared. That morning, she was already arranging presentation files when Daniel entered the conference room. Morning. Morning. You look like you slept about 4 hours. I got 5. Ooh. Living dangerously. Daniel laughed. What about you? I spilled coffee on myself before leaving home. He looked down at the faint stain near her sleeve. So today's off to a fantastic start. It can only improve from here. She reached into a drink carrier sitting on the table. I bought another coffee on the way. She handed one to Daniel. I figured you'd forget. He smiled. You know me too well. I've learned that project managers survive almost entirely on caffeine. I won't argue with that. It was a simple gesture, nothing more than kindness between coworkers. The morning disappeared beneath meetings. The afternoon became an endless cycle of phone calls, revised budgets, scheduling changes, and client requests. By 6 o'clock, most employees looked exhausted. Mark, the department director, walked into the conference room holding another stack of revised documents. The client wants additional adjustments. A chorus of groans echoed through the room. We finished those yesterday. I know. They've changed their minds again. Nobody argued. They simply returned to work. By 8 that evening, only Daniel and Vanessa remained in the office. Daniel leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. I think my brain officially stopped working an hour ago. Vanessa laughed. Mine left after lunch. They looked at the unfinished reports covering the conference table. If we stop now, Daniel said, tomorrow will be twice as stressful. She nodded. I know. He glanced toward the clock. Hungry? Starving. There's a restaurant downstairs. Too crowded. What about delivery? She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 20 minutes later, they were eating takeout in the conference room surrounded by paperwork. For the first time all day, nobody mentioned budgets or deadlines. Instead, they talked about childhood memories, terrible cooking disasters, embarrassing school stories, and movies they both secretly enjoyed despite pretending otherwise. The conversation flowed effortlessly. It felt harmless. And that was exactly why neither of them noticed the first boundary quietly beginning to disappear. Dinner with the project team became less frequent after the deadline passed, but Daniel and Vanessa still found reasons to cross paths. Sometimes it was a question about a report. Other times it was a discussion that could easily have been an email. At first, Daniel didn't think much of it. He still came home to Emma every evening. They still ate dinner together, watched their favorite shows, and talked about their day. From the outside, nothing had changed. But little things had. When Vanessa sent a message after work, Daniel answered. When she thanked him for helping her through a difficult day, he replied. When their conversations drifted away from deadlines and budgets, he didn't stop them. He told himself they were only talking. Nothing more. One evening, Emma noticed his phone vibrate 3 times in quick succession. Busy night? She asked with a smile. Daniel glanced at the screen before turning it face down. Just work. Emma nodded without another question. She trusted him. That trust made his answer hurt more than he realized. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Vanessa developed a routine neither of them planned. They grabbed coffee before meetings. They shared lunch when everyone else was busy. When one of them had a difficult day, the other was the first person they wanted to talk to. Neither of them said anything inappropriate. Yet they were slowly giving each other something that should have belonged elsewhere: their emotional energy, their attention, and their confidence. One Friday evening, Vanessa stood outside the office building waiting for a taxi when heavy rain suddenly began to pour. Daniel walked out carrying an umbrella. "You'll never find a cab in this weather," he said. She laughed. "Don't remind me. I can drop you off. It's on my way." She hesitated. "I don't want to inconvenience you." "It's fine." The drive was quiet at first. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield. Halfway there, Vanessa looked out of the window and spoke softly. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've been trying to convince myself to keep my distance." Daniel frowned. "Why?" "Because somewhere along the way, I forgot you weren't just my coworker." Silence filled the car. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He should have ended the conversation. He should have reminded her that he loved his wife. Instead, he simply drove on. When he stopped outside her apartment building, Vanessa reached for the door handle but paused. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have said that." Daniel finally found his voice. "I think we both need to be careful." She nodded. "I know." She got out and disappeared into the rain. Daniel sat in the car for several minutes before driving home. Emma greeted him with a smile. "You're late." There was traffic. It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. That night, Daniel barely slept. He knew something had changed. The following Monday, he tried to create distance. He avoided unnecessary conversations. He kept his office door closed. He answered only work-related messages. For 2 days, it worked. Then Vanessa sent a single text after work. "Can we talk? I don't want things to be awkward." Daniel stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Tomorrow." Tomorrow became coffee. Coffee became another conversation. The distance disappeared almost as quickly as it had begun. Emma, meanwhile, began noticing changes she couldn't explain. Daniel smiled at his phone more often. He seemed distracted during dinner. Sometimes she would tell him a story and realize he hadn't heard a single word. "Daniel?" "I asked if you wanted to visit my parents this weekend." "Oh, sorry." "Yes, of course." He looked genuinely guilty. Emma smiled, but a small knot formed in her stomach. The man who had always been fully present suddenly seemed somewhere else. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel was helping a neighbor move furniture when his phone, left charging on the kitchen counter, lit up. Emma wasn't trying to invade his privacy. She simply glanced at the screen, thinking it might be something urgent. The notification read, "Vanessa, we can't keep pretending this is just friendship." Emma felt the room spin. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. The passcode was still their wedding anniversary. He had never changed it. She opened the conversation. There were no explicit messages. There were no photographs. But there were pages of conversations filled with emotional intimacy, confessions, and admissions that they had both allowed the relationship to become something it never should have been. One message from Daniel stood out. I love my wife. That's why I hate what I've become. Emma lowered the phone slowly. Tears filled her eyes. When Daniel walked back into the house and saw the phone in her hands, he stopped in the doorway. Neither of them spoke. He already knew. Emma looked at him with tears streaming down her face. You gave someone else the part of your heart that belonged to us. Daniel couldn't deny it. I'm so sorry. She shook her head. I kept wondering what I'd done wrong. You did nothing wrong. Then why? There isn't an answer that will make this hurt less. Emma wiped her face. I trusted you. I know. And you broke that trust. Daniel stepped closer. I'll end it. Emma looked at him quietly. You should have ended it before it started. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Over the next several weeks, Daniel tried everything he could to repair the damage. He ended all personal contact with Vanessa and requested a transfer to another department. Vanessa also asked to be reassigned. She sent Emma a brief letter apologizing for her part in the hurt she had caused, without asking for forgiveness. But some wounds don't heal simply because apologies are sincere. Emma realized that every memory she cherished was now competing with doubt. She no longer knew which smiles had been genuine and which had hidden secrets. One evening, she packed a suitcase. Daniel stood in the doorway, tears filling his eyes. Please, stay. Emma looked around the home they had built together. I still love you. Daniel's face brightened for a moment. Then she continued. But I don't know how to trust you anymore. She picked up her suitcase. I hope one day you become the man I believed you already were. She walked out the front door. Daniel didn't try to stop her. He knew this wasn't the moment he had lost his marriage. That had happened one small choice at a time. Months later, their divorce was finalized. Daniel accepted responsibility without blaming anyone else. Vanessa eventually left the company to start over somewhere new. Emma slowly rebuilt her life with the support of her family and friends. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but neither did her hope. She learned that loving someone and trusting someone are not always the same thing. Sometimes love survives. Sometimes trust doesn't. And when trust is repeatedly traded for secrecy, even the strongest marriage can quietly fall apart long before anyone realizes it's happening.